Good afternoon and welcome to the Middle East Forum's webinar and podcast series featuring discussions from Middle East Forum projects. My name is Benjamin Baird and I am the Deputy Director of Islamist Watch, a project of the Middle East Forum. I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes as we are joined by our esteemed guest, U.S. Senate candidate Josh Mandel, who is here to discuss his long fight against radical Islam. Mr. Mandel is running in 2022 for Ohio's open U.S. Senate seat to succeed Republican Rob Portman. He served 2 terms in Iraq with the Marine Corps Reserve as an intelligence specialist. At the same time, he was just beginning his political career with the Lyndhurst City Council and in 2006, the House of Representatives. In 2011, Mr. Mandel was elected Ohio State Treasurer and was reelected in 2014. During his time as Ohio's Chief Investment Officer, the state retained the highest possible rating from Standard & Poor's for its government investment fund. Mr. Mandel received his bachelor's degree from Ohio State University, go Buckeyes, and his JD from Case Western Reserve. So without delay, let us begin. Let's start with your military service. How has your experience on the battlefields of Iraq informed your political decisions today in regards to radical Islam?
Sure, I did a couple tours in Anbar province, Iraq, did my small part. My first tour was, we spent a lot of time on the Syrian border. Our unit was charged in part with securing the Syrian border and stopping the flow of foreign weapons and foreign fighters across that border. And, I recall our apprehending and catching just guys from all over the Middle East. One of the ways we described that border is we sort of compared it to the bar in Star Wars where Jabba the Hutt is. And there was just like characters from all over the universe, a lot of just bad dudes, from all over the Middle East, but they were coming down from Chechnya and over from Eritrea and, throughout the Middle East, Africa, and even down from Europe. And, they were coming into Iraq for one reason, to spill American blood and to kill Americans. So, we catch them coming across the border. It's not much of a border there. When we were there, it was just a berm. It was a, mound of dirt. So they walked over, they rode bikes, they rode motorcycles. They came in the Euphrates River, they swam, they were on boats, all different ways. And it was the first time that I saw firsthand that there were all these military age men throughout the world who felt inspired by Islam to kill Americans. And one of my takeaways from that first tour in Iraq in 2004 is that when Muslims say they want to destroy America, we should believe them. When Muslims say that they want to push Israel into the sea, we should believe them. When Muslims say that they want to institute Sharia law in places like Cleveland or Toledo or Detroit, we should believe them. And one of the problems in politics today is that you have a lot of politicians, both Democrat and Republican, who sort of poo-poo it. And they say, well, they don't really mean that. And the reality is they do really mean it. And I believe we need United States senators, congressmen, diplomats, and people throughout our areas of leadership in the U.S. government who understand that there are tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Muslims throughout this world, statistically, who think it's an honor to kill themselves in the act of killing us as Americans or us as Christians and Jews. And so let's take that threat seriously and let's put in place policy leaders who understand that threat. And that doesn't mean we should be engaging in military adventurism. I actually think we have too many troops deployed overseas. But it does mean that we should have foreign policy, diplomatically, military policy, military posture that protects Americans from this threat and that also protects our culture here in America. This is about protecting innocent American lives here and abroad, but it's also about protecting our culture. And as we know, America was founded and grew strong on a bedrock of Judeo-Christian values. And I believe, what a lot of these Islamists want to do is destroy that Judeo-Christian bedrock, smash it into smithereens, and institute Sharia law throughout the United States.
Sure. So we should take Islamists at face value when they tell us that they want to destroy America. That is definitely what we're hearing from Islamists in places like the Middle East. In the United States, they're not so vocal about that, and they seem to take a more gradualist approach to ultimately seeking a caliphate and the establishment of Sharia law. So what is the commonality between Islamists in the Middle East and Iraq and places that you've been, and here in the United States? What do they have in common? If not strategy, ideologically, what drives them?
Well, ideologically, I mean, they see you, me, and your viewers here on this webinar, on this podcast, as infidels. And they believe that they are commanded by Allah to kill infidels, kill you and me in the name of Islam. And it's not much more complicated than that. And I think one of the reasons why they've been able to inspire so many young men and women in the Muslim faith to kill themselves in the act of killing Christians and Jews is because they break it down very simply. And they explain in the classroom, whether that's classrooms here in the United States or classrooms in the Middle East. They explain in the mosques, whether that's mosques here in the United States or mosques in the Middle East, that Christians and Jews are infidels, and they want us to either convert or die. And so, these are not, words that the media likes to hear. These aren't words that, a lot of educators in academia and the intelligentsia like to hear. These are definitely not words that the cocktail party circuit likes to talk about in elitist places like, Hollywood and New York and DC. But this is just the reality on the ground. And I believe, in places like Columbus and Toledo, where that there are Muslims being radicalized every single day, that we need to be vigilant in stopping that. A lot of people don't realize that outside of Minneapolis, the largest Somali population in America is in Columbus, Ohio. And both Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Columbus, Ohio, they chose, for whatever reason, to become sanctuary cities for Somali Muslims. And now those Somali Muslims are instituting Sharia law, and they're radicalizing their own. And better than I, from the incredible work that you guys do, what the threat is that they're presenting to those of us who are peace-loving, America-loving patriots.
And they're not really assimilating either, are they? Somali Americans here in Columbus, Ohio, they tend to live in the same communities. Often they're here for years at a time before learning the English language. They tend to make use of America's social welfare programs. How does that tie into the radicalization process?
You made some great points there. One thing to add on there is they understand the power of birthrights. I was talking with Brigitte Gabriel, it's probably a month or two ago, and she told me it was a term in Arabic, and I forgot the actual term. You might know it, but it was a expression, which is basically, we will not kill them with bullets, we will kill them with our bellies. And the way the expression, the way she explained it to me is through taking advantage of open borders, taking advantage of lax immigration laws, taking advantage of the laws of places like the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, what have you. They want to take over these countries. And look no farther than London, Paris, Brussels, and many other cities in Europe. What's happening? I mean, there are these no-go zones where families who've lived in these cities and these communities for generations, they're not allowed to go into these Muslim areas, these Sharia law areas. And even if they are allowed, they're afraid to go. Think about that for a second. And that's exactly what they want to do to places like Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati and Dayton and Toledo and Youngstown. And over my dead body, am I going to let that happen as a United States Senator?
Right. My understanding is many cases, these no-go zones, if they're not formal no-go zones, that exactly as you say, people are afraid to go there, and there's really no reason for a non-Muslim to end up in these neighborhoods. So I want to go back to something you said earlier. You've noted before that the United States was founded on a bedrock of Judeo-Christian values, and you tweeted recently that Judeo-Christian values are superior to radical Islam. Can you elaborate on that to some extent?
Sure. I mean, I think there's so many differentiating factors between the Judeo-Christian ethic and Islam or atheism or other belief sets, but just to pinpoint one of them, like one of the main differentiating factors is our acknowledgement of good versus evil and our willingness to fight for good over evil. And, right now there's a lot of evil in this world, and there's a lot of evil here in the United States. And, in this campaign, I'm running for United States Senate. I'm actually not running it through Republican Party groups, even though I'm a Republican. I'm running the campaign through churches because I believe that the only way we're going to combat this evil and the only place we're going to save our country is in houses of worship. And so, in fact, this webinar we're doing right now, I'm actually doing it from First Baptist Church of Miamisburg, which is in Dayton, Ohio. Yesterday morning, I spoke at Victory and Truth Ministries, which is a church in Bucyrus, Ohio. And tonight I'm speaking at a church called Solid Rock Church, which is in Lebanon, Ohio, Warren County. And so, this is where we're going to save the country. And this is where we need to put our foot down. And this is where we need to educate our kids and grandkids that when Muslims say they want to destroy America, we should believe them. And we need to rise up and fight them and defeat them.
Sure. So speaking of taking the fight to radical Islam, also in reviewing your social media, I noted that that you had a poll up at one point that noted that in Central America, you asked the question, you posed the question, which groups are you afraid of will commit the most crimes in America? And you mentioned Central American gang members, and you said Muslim terrorists. Is there a threat on the southern border from Islamists here in the United States?
Of course there is. The left says, we're Islamophobes if we talk about that, but there are multiple people on the FBI terrorism watch list trying to come across that border. There were 2 guys from Yemen alone who were caught. And of course, listen, what's going on at the border, that's a whole nother topic, but it's not an open border. It's worse than that. It is a facilitated invasion. I believe that Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, funded by Soros, coordinated by Obama and his pals like Susan Rice and Samantha Powers and Eric Holder, Valerie Jarrett and others. And these are bad people. These are really, really anti-American people. Mm-hmm. They're coordinating all this, and Soros is funded. Take the Haitians, for instance. Last time I checked, there's an enormous body of water between Haiti and Texas. How the heck did 15,000 Haitians get to the Texas border? The Yemenis terrorists, Chinese national spies. I understand how the Mexican drug cartels get there, but Yemen ain't too close to Texas. Haiti ain't too close to Texas. China, it goes on and on and on. And so, I think the southern border is most definitely an area where we have to stay vigilant. I was and continue to be a strong supporter of President Trump's building a wall. I think walls work. Look no farther than the wall that the Israelis built, because the Palestinians are acting like animals and don't respect life, and they're, advancing the cause of Islamic terrorism. So the Israelis put up a wall to block them. And listen, my personal feeling is they should put up a similar type big concrete wall on the Mexican border and just keep all these people out.
Right. And there's certainly a number of Hezbollah and Hamas cells which are proliferating throughout South America, making their way to the southern border and crossing. So I'm glad to see you prioritize that.
Yeah, Hezbollah, you mentioned Hezbollah. Listen, we all know on this webinar that, Hezbollah is Iran. Iran is Hezbollah, Hezbollah is Iran. And, you look what, Iran is funded, with Hezbollah in Beirut and throughout Lebanon, and the terror they've wrought there on Lebanese Christians and the economy and just innocent people there in Lebanon. And obviously, what they're perpetrating on Israel and other parts of the Middle East. But you hit the nail on the head, Ben, that now that, Hezbollah is definitely active throughout, South America, Central America, and definitely trying to penetrate into the United States. And let's not separate Hezbollah from Iran. Just to repeat, Hezbollah is Iran, Iran is Hezbollah. And, Iran, I believe, is the largest exporter of terror in the world.
Sure. Oh, and speaking of Iran, and I'm going to take you back a few years here. As a state representative for Ohio, your very first bill, I believe, was an initiative to force the multi-billion-dollar Ohio pension fund to divest from companies doing business in Iran. I was completely unaware of this. Do states continue to invest their pension funds with hostile regimes in places like Iran? And just how bad is this problem? Is it statewide? Is it nationwide?
Yeah, I started this movement along with a state legislator from Florida and the state CFO down there. So we educated ourselves on what was going on, and we uncovered that here in Ohio and in every state in the nation, the pension funds were taking the retirement money of cops and firefighters and teachers and others, and they were investing it in energy companies that were drilling oil in Iran, making money off Iran. And so
Wow.
the regime in Iran was then using that money to fund roadside bombs against American troops in Iraq. So think about that. You take for instance, let's say you take a cop in Youngstown, Ohio, who's a reservist in the Marine Corps. He gets activated to go serve in Iraq. So his retirement money in the Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund was being invested in Iran. And then that same dollar, that's his earnings and his retirement, was being used to fund roadside bombs to kill him in Iraq.
Wow.
Think about that for a second. And so I stood up and said, no more. We're going to take a stand. And I was a little naive. It was my first bill as a legislator. And they tell you when you're a legislator, do an easy bill as your first bill, like, name a street or try to, name a community center. And I chose as my first bill taking on the most powerful force in state politics, which is the pension funds and the government unions. And, I mean, these guys, they're thugs, these bureaucrats at the pension funds. They put my home phone number on the internet. They were lying to their retirees and their members. And, I'm not one to back down from a fight. And so, we brought in like James Woolsey, who was the former CIA director. We brought in Deborah Burlingame, whose, brother was unfortunately killed in 9/11. He was one of the, I think, American Airlines pilots on one of the flights that was hijacked. We brought in, some others, Sarah Steelman, who at the time was the, state treasurer of Missouri, who'd done a lot of good stuff on Iran divestment, brought her in. And the most powerful thing we did was we created this incredibly strong coalition with a lot of veterans groups and a lot of both Christian and Jewish groups to combat this. And we made Ohio the first state in America to have an Iran divestment policy on the books. Florida passed their legislation, and then we created this momentum nationally. And I think most states in America, if not all states, have some semblance of Iran divestment policy on the books. And so if you're a big private equity fund or hedge fund and you're going to raise money now from state pension funds, one of the things you have to certify is that you don't invest in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so, we were doing our small part from the state level to tighten that economic noose on the terrorist regime there in Tehran. And so when I was done being state rep, I think the pension funds are like, finally got rid of this guy. Little did they know that I was running for state treasurer. And I was going to become the custodian for the pension funds, over $200 billion of pension money. And I was going to appoint members to serve on the pension fund boards. And, when we were interviewing people to serve in the pension fund boards, one of the questions we always asked were, what is your position on Iran divestment? Because we wanted to make sure that we were appointing people that were in line with ensuring that the pension funds aren't investing a penny in Islamic terrorism.
So you were just getting started there. And many other states have adopted this as well. It would be great then if we could look at pension funds funding other Islamist regimes, for instance, Qatar or Turkey, which is sort of the center of the Islamist world right now.
I think it's a great idea. Definitely something worth looking into. And I think it's a great idea. Listen, I think sanctions work. I think tightening economic nooses work. I think there's a next generation in Iran, like a younger generation that does not like where the Iranian leaders have taken the country. Right. And I think there's a more there's a definite divide in Iran between, I think, a lot of the younger non-radicalized men and women, and then where the where the clerics there are, and we'll see where things go.
Right. I mean, Trump's tough policy against Iran produced dividends in many ways. For instance, some of the largest protests the country had seen since the 1979 Islamic Revolution occurred at the height of sort of the sanctions and the tough policies by the Trump administration.
I mean, President Trump was the best president in my lifetime, and probably the best president ever when it came to combating radical Islam and keeping America safe. And listen, the guy who came before him, Obama, drops a pallet of $400 billion of cash in the middle of the night.
Mm.
And now Biden and Kamala Harris and Blinken and these guys, they want to play footsie there. And listen, my spidey senses tell me that Valerie Jarrett is still integrally involved with all this. And we know she is pro-Iranian. I mean, who knows, we might read one day that she's an agent of the Iranian government. I don't have evidence of that, but
Sure.
Would I be surprised if we found that out one day? No way. I would not be surprised at all.
So there are groups here in the United States that we know are in line with foreign Islamist organizations. In 2017, you called the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, a front for terrorism. CAIR's relationship with Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood is well documented. How would you as a senator respond to groups like CAIR? And before you answer, a quick disclaimer here of sorts. We know CAIR has had members that have been convicted or deported on terrorism charges. We know they're in line with groups like Hamas, and they actually started as a propaganda outlet for Hamas. But more or less, they've learned to work within America's democratic institutions. And more recently, they've aligned with the left in this regard. So how do we legislate against groups like CAIR? Do we treat it, have them fall under the Muslim Brotherhood umbrella and designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist entity? Do we treat Islamist actors like we did the Communist Party back in the 1950s? I know it's a difficult question. How do you go after groups that are on the surface lawful, but what would you do as a senator in this regard?
Well, as we know, CAIR, Council on American Islamic Relations, is a terrorist front group. Let's just call it what it is. They're unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land case, as you articulated. Many of their members and leaders have been, deported or indicted, on terrorism-related cases. And it's one of those situations again where you got to believe what they say. If you listen to Linda Sarsour's speeches, you listen to what Linda Sarsour says when she speaks at CAIR meetings, you listen to some of the other leaders there, they want to take down our country. They want to destroy America. And I believe organizations like CAIR are the enemy. And, as a United States Senator, I will be their worst enemy.
Right. Linda Sarsour, Linda Sarsour, in fact, was at a Muslim Advocacy Day in Columbus, Ohio, a couple of years back, where she very firmly stated that one of her missions was to fight anti-Sharia legislation that was making its way through state houses across the country.
Yeah, just vile. Listen, I know we got to go in a few minutes, but
Sure.
I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, because if it weren't for Minneapolis becoming a sanctuary city for the Somali Muslims, we wouldn't have Ilhan Omar in Congress. Frankly, if it wasn't for Ilhan Omar lying on her immigration papers and committing immigration fraud and marrying her brother in violation of U.S. law, she wouldn't even be in the United States anymore. And that's why I've said on social media, she should not be supported. She should be deported. And when I look at Ilhan Omar, when I look at Rashida Tlaib, they're not congressional representatives. They're terrorist spokesmen. I mean, they have turned into spokesmen for Hamas. And, it's one of the reasons I look forward to going to the United States Senate, in addition to standing up for the Constitution and the Bible and the freedom and liberty and American values we hold dear, is to be a thorn in the side and wake up every morning combating and being a forceful counterweight to Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and the other members of the squad who are trying to take down America.
Well, it's certainly refreshing to hear that from a Senate candidate. That about wraps up our time for today. I'd like to thank our guest, former Ohio Treasurer, Mr. Josh Mandel, for joining us. If you have any follow-on questions for myself or our guests, please feel free to reach out to me directly at baird@meforum.org. And I'm sure he or his staff will have no problem getting back to you.
Sure.
Thanks
Yeah.
for
And
watching. Sure.
you can check out, if you have questions for us, my website's real easy. It's joshmandel.com. It's just joshmandel.com. You can communicate with me through there. You can communicate with me on Twitter or Facebook if it's a day that I haven't been kicked off. And you can communicate with our campaign. We're pretty easy to get a hold of. And I'm pro God, pro gun, pro Trump, pro America first, and appreciate your time. And frankly, I appreciate everything you guys do to combat radical Islam and keep America safe.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel, and thank you for your service as well. Thanks for watching to our audience, and we'll see you next time, next Friday, for more discussions with Middle East project directors. Thank you very much.